spewing over US Vice President J.D. Vance's recent comments about, quote, Chinese peasants. On Tuesday, Beijing slammed Vance for his comments that have drawn widespread ire and ridicule on China's internet in comparisons with Vance's own self-proclaimed hillbilly background. Our Will Ripley has the story.
Well, good morning, everybody.
The American hillbilly versus China's so-called peasants. It all started with this.
And to make it a little bit more crystal clear, we borrow money from Chinese peasants to buy the things those Chinese peasants manufacture. From Chinese peasants.
Vance's Chinese peasants comment reaching Beijing within hours. The government's response? Swift and scathing.
It's both astonishing and lamentable to hear this vice president make such ignorant and disrespectful remarks.
On China's tightly controlled internet, government censors are allowing Vance's interview to go viral, amplifying the outrage, igniting anger and sarcasm. Have you said thank you for the money we lent you? A reference to China being the second largest foreign holder of U.S. government debt, and that infamous Oval Office exchange with Ukraine's president.
You should be thanking the president.
One hashtag about the Chinese peasants' remark shot to the top of China's Twitter-like platform Weibo, with millions of views and counting. Many comments boasting of China's modern achievements. Look, this is their true face, arrogant and rude as always. We may be peasants, but we have the world's best high-speed rail, the most powerful logistics, and leading AI and drone technologies. Aren't such peasants quite impressive? Former Global Times editor Hu Xijin posted on Weibo, this true peasant who came out of rural America seems to lack perspective. Many people are urging him to visit China and see reality with his own eyes. Many in China are interpreting Vance's comments as describing all Chinese people. Some even referencing Vance's memoir and movie.
How many times have you seen this?
As one social media post put it, the author of Hillbilly Elegy is calling Chinese peasants? Really? Incidentally, Hillbilly Elegy was translated into Mandarin. It's actually a bestseller in China. But the vice president's soundbite has spiraled into yet another war of words between the U.S. and China. Many Chinese are calling his remark proof of what they call American arrogance, as if U.S.-China tensions weren't bad enough over things like tariffs, technology, Taiwan. CNN has reached out to J.D. Vance's office for comment, and so far, nothing. Will Ripley, CNN, Taipei.
Well, China, now facing 104% tax on its goods entering the United States, is also hitting back. Beijing announcing it will retaliate with an 84% levy on its own on US imports. And the Bank of England here is issuing a stark warning saying, quote, the global risk environment has deteriorated and uncertainty has intensified. CNN correspondent Anna Stewart is here with me in London. Anna, the markets opened, just half an hour ago. Been pretty volatile today, especially after that announcement from China. What have we been seeing in the interim?
Well, markets were pretty unsettled when they opened on Wall Street. We can check in on them now. I believe they are now trading a little bit higher at this stage. Can't tell you why, Christina. We are just looking at extreme volatility every day. Roll with the punches. We are seeing oil prices much lower, at the lowest since February 2021. This is as investors are very concerned that we could be looking at a global recession. We are seeing bond yields spike. This is for the US 10-year Treasury. This is suggesting, of course, there are concerns about the US's status as a safe haven in a long-term time frame, which is pretty concerning. And we've seen really unsettled markets in Europe and in Asia.
Well, as my understanding is that if the US markets close just a few percentages down today, we will be in bear market territory if we're not there already. Talk to us about some of the sort of financial terminology we may hear percolating today.
Let's give you some light
as
relief.
The markets move.
Bear market territory is when an asset or particularly a stock index closes 20% lower than its recent high. So there is a figure that investors have for that, and they'll be watching that very closely. You can be in bear market territory, but not in a bear market until it actually closes at that price.
Okay. Dead cat bounce.
Now, I don't
My
know
favourite thing I've heard in
who
the
is
last
responsible
24
for this, but the saying is that even a dead cat will bounce if you drop it high enough. This is another one for markets. Now, a dead cat bounce is usually referring to perhaps you're seeing asset prices rise, but then they fall again. So it's just a temporary relief. Perhaps that's what we saw yesterday. You could maybe call that a dead cat bounce.
So as people are looking for the market to, quote, bottom out, I mean, this is what we could be seeing.
There are people trying to buy the dip is our next one, which is when you're hoping, obviously, as asset prices fall, to try and find its bottom, get it cheap, and hope that prices rise.
And my favourite one of the lot, catch a falling knife.
This is when buying a dip goes wrong.
Right.
You never want to catch a falling knife. You want to get it when it has fallen. It would hurt. But these are just some of the many sayings. We could do this every day. They're all kind of crazy, but I hope you enjoy them.
I really do. That last one sounds a bit like an 80s power ballad to me, so I am enjoying it. But look, as we kind of look to what comes next, the chances of global recession are being upped, it feels, by the day here. We mentioned bond markets, the price of commodities as well, oil, gold, all pointing really to an acceleration towards a recession.
Well, at the end of last week, we had JP Morgan, I think it was, raising the likelihood of a recession from 40% to 60%. And that was just based on so-called Liberation Day and China retaliating. But now we have the US retaliating against, China retaliating again. We have the EU, which has just announced it will also be implementing tariffs against the US next week. We'll get a full list and a full amount of how much that will be. But you can expect that recession risks will only grow as more of the global trade is dragged into this war. And what we're seeing between China and the US, you know, we're talking about the two biggest economies in the world here. We're seeing a game of chicken play out. It's absolutely extraordinary, and it will have very real ramifications for consumers of both countries, but for all of us all around the world as inflation spikes.
And no real end game in sight yet.
Currently, no end game in sight.
Yes, Anna, thank you.
Phil, just in terms of what Republicans are saying, I understand that some Republicans remember, this is the party that is traditionally supportive of free trade, some Republicans are actually voicing their concerns to the president about the economic implications of these tariffs.
Yeah, it seems like so long ago, right? Where what the president is pursuing here is antithetical to traditional Republican ideology as we all understood it for several decades. And yet, he now is the core and the heart of the Republican Party. And so what's been fascinating to watch Republicans, many of whom are diametrically opposed to even the general idea of what's been launched over the course of the last several weeks, let alone over the course of the last 11 hours, is trying to figure out how to tell the White House they don't know that this is necessarily a great plan, but also not get into the crosshairs of President Trump. Now, there have been some Republicans, particularly Republican senators, who have made clear they are very wary of the direction that this is going. But guys, I think it's important to note Congress long ago handed off the tariff authority over to the presidency. There's no sense, while there are bipartisan efforts to try and get it back, that that's going to move anytime soon. These are the dynamics. I think when you look at these dynamics, the kind of bilateral stare down we're watching between China and the US right now, people need to understand the severity of where this is. And it's not just because of the tariff rates and the retaliation, very clearly in a tit-for-tat spiral on some level, but it's also the words that we've heard from both sides. Obviously, Chinese officials saying for several weeks that they would, quote, fight to the end when it came to a tariff war. Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, saying yesterday the president has a spine of steel, quote unquote, underscoring kind of his posture on things. But when you talk to U.S. officials, it's also important to know kind of the underpinning of the decision to move forward here. And that is the firm belief that the U.S. market, that U.S. consumers can win in the long run in any trade war, including with China. Take a listen to what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said this morning.
They have the most imbalanced economy in the history of the modern world. And I can tell you that this escalation is a loser for them. That they have some very smart, the economists, the academicians, technocrats within their bureaucracy, and they would be telling the leadership that we do not have the edge here. They are the surplus country, that their exports to the U.S. are 5 times our exports to China. So they can raise their tariffs, but so what?
And I just want to make very clear here that what you heard from the Treasury Secretary is not some kind of hyperbolic brushback or rhetorical threat that he's making just because he's on TV. That is firmly the belief of the economic team writ large across the administration. And that belief is animating the idea that, hey, anyone who wants to fight, anybody who wants to retaliate, the U.S. is more than welcome to have that fight. What they haven't actually explained is if that is a fight and if it plays out over a significant period of time, who gets hit? And likely it's U.S. consumers.